Okay, so sales compensation. Excited to go through this one with you. The first thing that we're going to do is think through budget, which should be pretty simple because we can't talk about custom budgets for everybody here. Everybody's industry and opportunity is going to be a little bit different. But the big idea for S4 out of the S20 sales team operating system is going to be create a simple, profitable comp plan that aligns with performance benchmarks to motivate and retain reps. And so first, we need to create a budget. So if you remember earlier, we talked about, bigger goals. So, we talked about if you're at $1 million, you probably want to go to 2 million. If you're at 2 million, you probably want to go to 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and then 50, right? Those are typically the numbers. And if you're below $1 million, which is, gosh, a large percentage of the clients that we serve, we have tons of companies that are doing 250K, 500K that are looking to go to the 1 to 2, 3, 4, $5 million mark. So if I'm using $1 million plus examples, I'm not trying to exclude you. It's just for the sake of illustration. If, as an example, you're at $1 million and you go to 2 million, well, the problem is that's not exciting to the marketplace. So we need to think through a couple goals in the future. As an example, if I reverse engineer my sales org chart, all the roles in the leadership structure that would be required to accomplish a much bigger goal, three goals down the line, well, all of a sudden I have a large leadership org chart or a large org chart with 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5 leadership opportunities in it. And that's something much more exciting in the marketplace that I can recruit into, which is that's one of the big things that separates you in the recruiting competition with other people in the marketplace that have more financially secure opportunities. We're talking in context of building a commission-based sales team. Your budget, if you're going from 1 to 2 million, may look a lot different from going to 1 to 5 or even 1 to 10. And so you want to think a little bit larger and then think through at scale based on our role structure, our roles as well as the leadership structure, everything marketing and sales related, what's going to be the budget at scale that fits all of our marketing and sales operations in it? Administrative, tech, sales leadership, setters, closers, whatever's relevant to your model, what's going to fit into that budget. And so for most, you're going to create your budget based on, total revenue, gross profit, or net profit. But the percentage is going to be radically different for everybody. We have clients that, have commission models where they pay out 2%. We have clients that have models where they pay out 50% and everything in between. So it's impossible for me to give you a cookie cutter percentage today. But the main point is that you need to think through your plans at scale and then pull, as to the best of your ability, your marketing and sales, right? Lead generation, sales, your leadership structure, administrative and tech costs all into one budget and think through at scale, what's not going to hurt the company, what's going to be profitable at scale, what's that budget look like? And is it on gross profit, net profit? And you need to define that budget. That's kind of the main point. Okay. So again, this is not your budget, but as an example, let's say that, and we'll just use 25% on on gross for the sake of today's illustration. Again, that is not your answer. I'm just going to use it as an example today. But the main point is you need to outline what your budget is, and you need to think through at scale what leadership and marketing and or lead generation costs are going to be included in that, so you don't have to change pay later. Okay, let's say that you had 25%, but today you're paying reps 20%. Okay. And then you start to scale and then you realize, oh, I need to fit setters into the mix. Or I need to, implement ads or inbound into the mix or administrative people into the mix. And you only have 5% left. Well, the problem is that's not going to be enough for all these three. And therefore you're going to have to deduct or reduce your rep commission. So that's kind of the main reason for thinking through your commissions at scale, so that when you reverse engineer your budget based on your role structure, you're allocating it correctly, meaning that you don't have to change it later. Okay? Because if you build a team of five, as an example, and you're paying them 20% or whatever it is, and then you realize later as you scale your company that you need more money to pay other staff to grow your organization, and you have to change these five reps pay, well, all of a sudden you're impacting revenue and seeing attrition. So that's one of the big reasons why you want to think through your budget. So your budget, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40%. I don't know. It really depends on how you look at your finances, gross revenue, gross profit, net profit. for companies that look at like gross revenue, which is the most common, and again, if this is not you, it's fine, but we typically see somewhere between 20 to 30% of total revenue. Okay, but again, that doesn't mean you have to be like you have to do that. That's just somewhat common, meaning that if in the middle is 25%, if the company makes 100K this month, that means up to 25K, 25% is allocated to our marketing and sales efforts, everything. Okay. So after you think through your budget, then it's time to, allocate that budget to your roles. Okay. So for the sake of today's illustration, let's say that when we reverse engineer our org chart, right, we're going to go from this revenue mark to that revenue mark. Let's say that we reverse engineer the structure and we came to the conclusion that we only need one leadership layer, that there's going to be ownership, and we're going to have, maybe two teams, sales managers, and then there's going to be, this is just an example, just to kind of illustrate the budget piece. 10 setters, 5 closers, 10 setters, 5 closers. And this structure is going to allow us to hit our goals in the next 2 to 3 years, whatever those are. Well, what this has showed me is I have ultimately four positions that I'm putting inside of the budget. I have sales management, right? Although there's two sales managers, this is just one line item in our costs. I have setters, that's like marketing. I have closers, that's the selling. And then I have, miscellaneous, which is, admin plus tech. So those are kind of four areas of cost allocation that I'm going to use for this 25% example. So if I go over here and I have 25%, well, let's call it, admin, setters, closers, and then leadership or the sales management opportunity. Okay, hopefully this is clear. What I'm doing is we've defined our role structure. Now we define our budget, and then I'm gonna, to the best of our ability, allocate our budget accordingly to ensure that the on-track earnings for the position is aligned with the competitive marketplace or better. Okay. And for simplicity reason, I'm just going to use 100K as an example, and I'm hoping that this will land and be simple enough. Okay, so let's use $100,000 in revenue as the example. So 25% of 100K. Okay, so I'm going to go, okay, how do I want to allocate this 25% along these four line items, admin and tech, setters, closers, and sales management, based on our org chart to ensure that I land inside of our budget, but also to ensure that all of these positions have compensation plans that are designed for recruiting and retention success. I gotta play with the numbers a little bit. Okay, I've already outlined numbers for the sake of today, so this will be simple. But in this example, I'm gonna go 2.5% for admin and tech. For setters, I'm gonna call it 6.25%. For closers, I'm gonna call it 10%. And for sales management, I'm gonna call it 6.25%. Meaning that for admin tech slash miscellaneous, if we had 100,000 in revenue, that means the allocation there, to kind of paint a picture, would be 2,500 bucks. If we had $100,000 come in from setters efforts, that would be 6,250, 6,250. If it was from closers, or like I typed up here, co-losers, I spelled that wrong, then it would be, $10,000 based on 100K. And for leaders, override salary, whatever it is, 6.25% on 100K would be 6,250. Okay. So the percentages, they're going to really depend on like the structure of your team, the structure of what's doable in the marketplace. But what I'm trying to attempt today is to help you think through budget and then ultimately allocation of that budget according to your roles, so that you can go, okay, based on like what a team is going to do and what a closer can do, what a setter can do, whatever your roles are, if we allocate this kind of budget based on what we assume that they would do, is their end income or on-track earnings monthly and annually, is it aligned with being competitive? That's what you're trying to define here. So as an example, if I didn't do this correctly and I needed setters in my model, but I paid the closer here 15%, okay, and then I try to add setters into the mix later, well, I'm either taking away from leadership or taking away from admin or closers, even worse, uh, and I'm affecting everything. Okay, so the main point here is thinking through budget allocation. This may kind of take you a while to flush through. And if you want us to do this for you, we can help you out a little bit with that. Um, but main topic for compensation is thinking through your budget and then your role structure and how that budget gets attached to your role structure and kind of finagling the numbers until you get to a place where the on-track earnings based on your assumptions in their role is going to result into good on-track earnings monthly and or annually, ideally competitive or better. Better is nice in a commission-based sales environment. And then lastly, after you've finalized the budget and you feel good about that, meaning, okay, out of our whatever, 20% budget, 8% of it is going to be attached to the sales position, whatever. Then you go, okay, for each one of these positions, they're going to define the full compensation plan based on that. Okay, so as an example, let's just use like one position for today's illustration. Let's say that we reverse engineer the budget, and based on our sales model, we come to the conclusion that our sales position is going to have a 15% budget on gross revenue. And I wish I can use perfect numbers to match with all of your kind of unique scenarios, but that's impossible to do. Compensation gets complex because everybody's so unique. But once you've defined your total budget long-term at scale and you've allocated to the best of your ability the percentage based on that budget to the appropriate roles, then you can start to like reverse engineer what the actual like day-to-day compensation plan is. So if I had a commission-based sales position in a sales role, well, I need to allocate that budget accordingly. Now, in a sales position, in most cases, you're going to have like two-thirds of the compensation be towards your base commission, meaning that if I have a 15% budget, two-thirds of that is obviously 10%, and that'd be towards my base, meaning that if a rep does 10K this week and we pay hypothetically weekly, then 10% on 10K is going to be $1,000 on their next paycheck. So that's your base commission. And then the other 5% or whatever, the other third-ish, and the numbers are not going to always be two-thirds and one-third, but it helps you kind of think through it a little bit. The other third is going to be allocated towards typically monthly bonuses. You could do quarterly bonuses and all that stuff, but I've found that, monthly bonuses is best, right? It incentivizes reps to produce this month and they get the money, more quickly versus stretching out things quarterly. Quarterly in some scenarios is better for like a leadership position. But in this hypothetical example, I got 15%, roughly two-thirds, sometimes more, is going to be allocated towards the base commission, which would be 10% in this example. And if 10% was getting allocated towards the base commission on 15%, then I'd have 5% in bonuses to pay out. Now, from there, I need to structure the bonus. And that's going to be nuanced as well. You typically want to think through what your expectations are. So let's say our expectations for a rep that's ramped up is doing $80,000 in revenue per month, right? Which is, right under 900, right under 1 million, 960 a year. Well, the goal here is to ensure that reps are ramping up to the minimums that we expect. The reason that's important to understand that is that'll help you think through your bonus structure monthly, because I want reps kind of at least doing that or close to that. And you can incentivize your bonuses on them hitting that as like the bare bones minimum bonus, meaning that you can go 80K, 90K, 100K, 110K. This is just an example, 120K. And if they hit the bare minimum, they get a 1% bonus. If they hit 90K in this example, oh gosh. If they hit 90K in this example, 1% on 80K, 2% on 90K, 3% on 100K, 4% on 110K, and then 5% on 120K. Well, in that example, I gave them a 10% on their base, plus a monthly bonus. And then here's the monthly bonus. You got 5 opportunities here. Okay. We want you to hit this and we incentivize you to hit the minimum by giving you a 1% bonus. So if you hit the minimums at 80,000 and you get a 1%, bonus, that means you're going to get an $800 bonus on top of whatever your base commission would be. If you did 80K on a 10% base, that would be $8,000 in commissions plus a 1% bonus. That'd be $8,800 in my commissions based on the comp plan. Or you can hit higher bonus tiers and ultimately max out at 5% bonus based on 120K. So if I got 5% on 120K, I'd have a larger bonus and I'd have a larger base commission and I'd make whatever I made, right? So 12K plus 5%, whatever that is, 17K, 18K, whatever that number is. Okay. And so what I've done here in short is I've taken 2/3 of the comp budget and I've allocated that towards the base. And then the rest is paid on monthly bonuses. And that's typically going to be, at least one and at the max 5 different, bonus opportunities, depending on the scenario. Okay. Um, a nuance for sales roles, by the way, if you have a full cycle sales position, if you have a full cycle sales position and it takes kind of a long time to ramp up into the position and it's not at face value the most attractive sales model, meaning that, it takes 60, 90 plus days and they're managing the full A to Z sales cycle, I mean, from lead generation to close, then sometimes you'll adjust the compensation a little bit more and give them a little bit more on the front end because it's so hard to ramp up into the position. Meaning, like, if I had a 15% budget, and it really depends, and it's kind of custom depending on the owner and their management style, as well as the sales cycle. But in some rare scenarios, if it takes a long time to ramp up into the position, and it's a highly technical, complex, long sales cycle type of opportunity, sometimes I'll just say, hey, just give the whole 15% to them for the sake of making recruiting and retention a little bit easier. Although technically there's not a monthly bonus tier. That's in rare scenarios. In some scenarios, we'll allocate more like 70 to 80% of the base budget. So maybe as an example, 12.5% out of the 15 or whatever the number is, and it'll be a higher base. And then the bonus structure will be really simple. So if our bare minimum was, 80K, and that's what we want to get everybody to, we would say, hey, if you do at least 80K, you will get you the other 2.5% bonus and max out at your 15% and just make the bonus structure a little bit simpler because the nature of the sales cycle and the sales model is not as attractive. If it's easier to ramp up into, and if everything's dialed and the sales cycle is kind of short, then you can kind of leverage up your monthly bonuses a little bit because your sales model and your sales cycle is designed for pushing people a little bit more. But if it's very, if it's longer technical sales cycle, everything's dependent on the rep, very entrepreneurial, then the reality is you don't have too much leverage to push, and you want to find that balance of making the opportunity as attractive as possible for the purposes of making recruiting as easy as possible, but practically getting them as much income as possible quickly because of the nature of the sales cycle. And so there's nuances there. Um, but that's a little bit about sales rep comp. It can be more nuanced than that, but that should give you guys enough to kind of think through your model a little bit. Now, for some of you, you're interested in the, maybe what a setter commission-based compensation plan would look like. We'll finish with that and then wrap up with with activity-based training pay. Okay, so real quick for setters, it's not always going to be like this, and it's kind of custom, but in most scenarios, they're going to get paid on qualified pitches. Okay, qualified pitches, meaning, if it's door to door or cold calling, whatever, they set an appointment, the appointment sits and it meets the qualifications of the company and sits down with the closer and gets pitched, right? They would get a commission on that. Every model's going to be different, but that's usually 100 to 300 bucks. Meaning I would pay, if I'm paying on the low end, I'm paying $100 for a qualified appointment to sit down with a closer. Okay, so there's usually a commission attached to a qualified appointment sitting down with a rep. So we got qualified pitch, and then we got commissions at a close, and then sometime a monthly bonus based on maybe the amount of closes. So let's say, I had three areas of providing commissions to setters in a commission-based setter environment. I'd pay them for appointments that they set that were qualified that ultimately got pitched. Right? That's my kind of requirement for giving them a commission on the front end. And then if any of those pitched leads closed, I would also give them a commission on that to financially incentivize them for higher quality leads and ultimately what we want in the sales cycle, which is revenue coming in. And then potentially, depending on other factors, based on either volumes of qualified pitches or closes, or maybe something else, sometimes activities, I would provide them a monthly bonus and ultimately have three compensation tiers attached to the position in a commission-based setter environment. Okay. You guys can learn more about that later. Okay. So activity-based training pay. Your guys' ramp-up periods are all different. For some of you, it's 2 weeks because it's an entry-level setter position, or it's a very low ticket, high volume sales model with a good lead generation process. And maybe it takes 2 to 4 weeks to ramp up in your position. For some of you, that's the case, not for a lot of you. For most of you, you're going to have like a 90-day-ish ramp up period, meaning you have a full cycle rep coming in, they're generating and closing their own leads, and it's going to take roughly 90 days to ramp up into the position and get fully through the learning curve and making decent money. And then for some of you who have, longer sales cycle, highly technical B2B opportunities, you may be in the 6 to 12 month ramp up timeline. But everybody's in a little different scenario. But what activity-based training pay is this understanding what it looks like to ramp up in your position, and then reverse engineering all the activities in the production required to ramp up into what you've recruited into, and then bonusing on top of your commission-based comp plan as reps hit minimums. This will make sense here in a second. And the goal here is to close the income gap as a rep ramps up into the role. So let's say that you have an expectation for reps to make $80,000 a year. Just for example. And let's also say that, or let's call this 100 grand, okay, and which is roughly 8 grand a month, okay, and that's kind of your bare minimum expectation. By the way, if yours is lower than that, if yours is 50 a year or twice as high as that, I don't care. This is just for the sake of illustration. But in terms of activity-based training pay, you want to think through the annual bare minimum income expectations, then think through the monthly. And then lastly, how long does it take to ramp up into this monthly income that we're recruiting into? So in this example, let's pretend that it's 3 months. Okay. So we got 3 months, month 1, month 2, and month 3. Meaning that if a rep does everything that they're required to do in the first 3 months, by the end of month 3, they're roughly at that 8K in income benchmark. Okay. So we go, what does it look like annually in terms of bare minimum income? What does it look like monthly based on that annual? What does it conservatively from a timeline perspective look like to ramp up into that income? And then we start to reverse engineer the numbers. So I first start thinking through the income. Okay, if they make 8K in month 3 in this example, conservatively, if we just kind of reverse engineer the numbers in our model, in our sales cycle, our compensation plan, what did they make in month 2? Well, for the sake of illustration, let's pretend it's 5K. Again, these are not your numbers. This is just an example. Okay, well, if they made 5K in this hypothetical example in month 2, what did they make in month 1? Let's pretend it's 2K. Okay, so the conclusion so far is that if a rep follows the process, they're going to make at least 2K in month 1, 5K in month 2, and 8K in month 3. Okay. Now what I do from here is I think through, all right, so if they came on board and they hit these bare minimums, and I know in general what it looks like from an income perspective, what was the actual high level production that was accomplished month to month? Okay, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to pretend that the average commission is $1,000. Okay, meaning that, okay, high level, they closed 2 deals in month 1, they closed 5 deals in month 2, and they closed 8 deals in month 3. I did that for the sake of math and hopefully kind of, making this a little make this make sense. So we pretended that it's 1K per commission, and this is the income benchmark. So I said the high level production was that they closed 2 sales, 5 sales, 8 sales, and now here they're on track for the bare minimums that we expect. Now that I understand the high level production benchmarks, then I get more granular. Okay, this is where it gets more important. So I've determined that we have a bare minimum expectation of 100K in annual income. That's 8K monthly income. That's 5K in month two conservatively, 2K in month one conservatively. And that based on our model, in general, they need to close 2 sales, 5 sales, and 8 sales to ramp up into that. So let's say also that although the commission is on average at 1K, maybe it takes a little bit to pay out in the commission-based model. So the money is not coming as quick, and therefore it takes a few months to get to 8K. Well, what activity-based training pay is it's reverse engineering all this down to the week and then tracking that and then bonusing reps as they're hitting the minimum. So if I know that they need to do this from a production perspective in month one, well, I go, okay, if they were to accomplish this in month one, what did they actually do week by week to accomplish that? So what did they do in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 to accomplish this? What do they do in weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8 to accomplish this? What do they do in weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12 to accomplish this? And now what I've done is based on our bare minimum expectations is I've outlined to the week exactly from an activity and production perspective what it looks like for them to accomplish the goals over 90 days, which is getting them to 8K a month, which is what we ultimately recruited them into. So the reps, when they come on board, they want this. They don't want to make 2K. They don't want to make 5K. They want to make 8K. So our goal is to provide clarity and systems to get them there. And part of that system can be improved compensation plan as they ramp up into the position. So what I could do is I could understand exactly what it looks like weekly and monthly and bonus reps weekly or bonus them monthly for hitting these benchmarks. Meaning I could, as an example, set aside, I don't know, $5,000. Hey, I'm not saying you have to do this. This is something that will double retention rates overnight if you're comparing it to a commission-based model. But I could outline maybe $5,000 and I can go, if a rep shows up and they follow our system weeks 1, 2, 3, 4 perfectly, then I'm going to give them $1,000 bonus at the end of month 1. If they follow weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8 perfectly, then I'm going to give them $1,000 bonus at the end of month 2. If they follow weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12 perfectly at the end of month 3, I'm going to have a bigger bonus based on our 5K 90-day budget of 3K, and they're going to get a 3K at the end of the timeline. So I got this carrot of 3K at the end, and I got these additional bonuses that help bridge the income gap a little bit as they ramp up into the big boy income, and they got these incentives to look forward to that not only help close the income gap, but it gives them more clarity on what for sure they will be making in those first 90 days as they get acclimated to the program. But it also impacts recruiting because I get to verbally say training pay, although it's financially conservative for the company because it's based on activities and production, but it while also proactively, increasing retention rates because reps are making more money more quickly. Okay, so this kind of idea can apply to an entry-level setter position in the first 2 to 4 weeks as they ramp up, to a closer position as they ramp up in the first 1 to 2 months, to a long sales cycle, direct-to-consumer or B2B opportunity. Probably over half of you could implement this and double your retention rates overnight. If you're an insurance, financial services, real estate company, and you require licensing, in a lot of scenarios like that, it doesn't work with how you run your company, but everybody's a little bit unique in their scenario. But that's a little bit about comp for today. Create your budget, allocate your budget according to your role structure, and if you can, implement activity-based training pay. Big idea for comp, S4, is create a simple, profitable comp plan that aligns with performance benchmarks to motivate and retain reps. And the overall focus is set budgets and structures that are profitable at scale while closing new higher income gaps. The closing of the new higher income gaps is with activity-based training pay.